If you like to make your NFL games a little bit more interesting, you've come to the right place. It's the Even Money Podcast with Ross Tucker and Steve Fezzik.
Yeah, Vegas, baby, Vegas. It is the Even Money Betting Podcast. We are presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. Most of you know that. 5 teams, 7 years, long time ago. Broadcaster now for CBS and Westwood One and the Philadelphia Eagles, among others. Thank goodness. I love having a podcast network. We did a special Ross Tucker football podcast today to go over all of the news going on in the NFL after day one of free agency. So if you want to know everything going on, make sure you listen or watch youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, today's Ross Tucker football podcast. We went division by division, team by team, what your team has gained, what they've lost, what every team's gained and lost for those of you that already have an eye on betting NFL football 2025 with the futures and the season win totals and all of those things. This show is extremely popular, mainly because of my co-host, Steve Fezzik. He's brilliant and he's hilarious. At Fezzik Sports on social media and only at Fezzik Sports. Please do not accept any substitutes. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL on social media. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. Can't tell you how much it means when you guys rate and review the show, which, by the way, is a great way to get your question answered by Steve on the show. Just rate and review the show. Forward me the screenshot, Ross at rosstucker.com. I'll ask your question to Steve right here on the show, or take advantage of any of our sponsors, including our new sponsor today, Monarch Money. Use them, sign up for them, use our code, forward that to me. Ross at rosstucker.com. You go right to the top of everything. Steve, we got a lot to get to today. We got to get to your thoughts on what some of these NFL moves make. I need your thoughts on these conference tournaments in college basketball that are this week, because you've been on a roll in college hoops. And then the bracket and everything's coming out on Sunday. So I want to know, right when the bracket comes out on Sunday, what we should be, I know we don't know what the bracket is yet, but what we should be looking at, what we should be betting, and how we should fill out a bracket, let alone all the bets. It's one of the biggest weeks of the year from a betting perspective. Before we get to the hoops, though, I mean, listen, we're not even 24 hours into free agency, and there's been some significant movement. Let me start with this, Steve, because I know that quarterbacks move the needle for you. And you were texting me about the Raiders and how big this is for the Raiders and all that. So we'll get into that. I guess my first question, though, is the Bears have added a bunch of people. The Panthers, the Patriots. Do any of those things move the needle for you if they're not quarterback related?
Any one player typically only moves the needle 1 point, non-quarterback, so they're not as significant. Having said that, I will say Carolina and New England were already both those teams, bad teams last year that were on my radar as far as teams that are going to take a big step forward. Young learned how to play the quarterback position, and New England was trending upward anyways. So both those teams were a lot better than the records last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see higher season win numbers on those two teams than you would expect.
Interesting. Okay. What did you mean by any one player can only move 1 point? What do you mean?
Oh, so even if I look at Jamar Chase, all right, stud wide receiver, he's worth like 1.25 points in the line. And so Higgins is worth less than a point. So you sign a dude like that, yeah, it helps. You spend $40 million on some stud at any position. He helps. That's not a quarterback. He upgrades your team by a point. But remember, Ross, you had the $40 million to spend. You could have just signed two $20 million guys that were both worth half a point. It really doesn't move the needle.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. So basically what you're saying is, other than quarterback, no matter how good any other player is, they're not really moving it more than a point.
That's right. And ultimately, the teams that improve the most are the ones that have the most money to spend, and they can go out and get dudes and guys. And the cumulative effect is that, they could upgrade their team 3 points if they add 5, 6 guys, but it's all about the money they're spending.
What about, I'm just curious, because I know you grew up in Dayton. Were you a Bengals fan growing up, Steve?
Oh, sure. Big Pete Johnson, Kenny Anderson. These, you probably don't even know these guys, right?
No, I know both of them. Yeah,
Oh,
Kenny
that's
Anderson
great.
for sure. Pete Johnson. I guess my question for you is, as you see the Bengals still don't have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson under contract, and I don't know why they wait. What's your take on the Bengals having grown up there?
Oh, it's been the same for 30 years. The Bengals are a very frugal organization, and you always have to worry about when a team has that reputation, deserve it or not, and it's deserved, that the players, they're shaking their heads. They're like, oh boy, even if they perform at a top level, am I going to get paid?
Well, so far the answer for T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, and Jamar Chase, arguably their 3 best players other than Joe Burrow, is no, that they have not gotten paid a contract to their liking at this point. That is the answer. All right. So let's get into some of the quarterback news. The one that you seem most anxious about and were talking to me the most about was the Raiders acquiring Geno Smith. Why are you so high on this?
Because Geno Smith is an average quarterback, and that is a huge upgrade because the Raiders haven't had a quarterback for years. So you look at O'Connell, I'm probably optimistic. I got him rated 3 points worse than an average quarterback. So that one move, picking up, journeyman Geno Smith off the scrap heap, he's perfectly competent NFL quarterback. An average quarterback, that's a 3-point upgrade. That's enormous compared to some of these other quarterback moves that really don't matter much. Like I look at Sam Darnold, for instance, compared to Geno Smith. Yeah, Geno Smith's better than Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold is also way, way better than O'Connell. So that's the big move. That's the big power rating bump in the Raiders.
Okay. So what does that mean? Give me the math on what that means if you have upgraded them by 3 points. Upgrade the Raiders by 3 points. What does that mean on the win total?
Yeah, so I'm going to score 51 more points, 17 games times 3. Don't ask me why, it just works out this way. Every extra 35 points you score, you pick up 1 game. It seems like you'd pick up more, but that's the number, 35 points. So 51 divided by 35, that's an extra win and a half for the Raiders in expectation. Though they should win 1 more or 2 more games.
Ooh, that's significant. What about any of these other teams, like the Seahawks getting Darnold? It seems like you like Geno more than Darnold, so it seems like for you that's not really, is it an upgrade or a downgrade? Is that a downgrade for the Seahawks?
Yeah, it's a half-point downgrade. To be fair, if you would have asked me week 15, I would have said it was a lateral move, and then I saw Darnold play the last 2 games of the season, right? And he was so awful. But not a significant difference, and really comes down to, at that point, I got to see how good of a fit Darnold is for Seattle and the like, and you got to do your homework there.
And then the Jets with Justin Fields. I'm curious about that one.
So this is interesting. There's 22 competent quarterbacks in the league that I consider you to be not unhappy about having them as a starter, and Fields is not one of them. Having said that, he's close. I have him 1.5 points worse than an average quarterback. So in the right system, if somehow the coaching staff can bring his game to the next level, he could well become an average quarterback. But that's the ceiling. That's as good as it's going to be. And it's probably not going to happen. I don't like it.
Ooh. But what did they get at that position last year?
Well, fair enough. Well, I mean, a whole bunch of yards. I would say Aaron Rodgers was a perfectly competent average quarterback last year. I'd have him right in the middle.
Okay, so you feel like this is a downgrade for the Jets.
Yes, but if they would have brought Rodgers back, since he's about 100 years old, I would have lowered Rodgers. This is where all the quarterbacks fall off the cliff. And if you think about Brett Favre and how good he was at 39, and then he's MVP candidate, and then 41, he's out of the league. So the same thing really is happening with Rodgers. So they didn't have a quarterback anyways. So it's pretty much, it's going to be the same this year with Rodgers or with Fields probably, but Rodgers was better last year than he'll certainly be if he plays this year.
Steve, I got a great new way to be able to increase our bankroll. It's called Monarch Money. It is an awesome app. Here's the deal. You really don't know. None of us do. No matter how often you look at your statements or whatever, you really don't have a great grasp of everything you're spending. I know I didn't. Just looking at the Monarch app, I realized the amount of money we spend on Starbucks, like for my daughters, are you kidding me? Ridiculous. Had multiple services that were being charged, like websites I signed up for one time because I was calling a college game that I was still paying for. Just stupid stuff. It should not be the case. Get control of your overall finances with Monarch Money. Use code EVEN at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code EVEN. You know what I like? I like saving money. I like not spending money when I don't have to spend money. You know a good example of this? Vodka. Yeah. If you're buying vodka to have a drink, you guys know I've told you before, I like to get some type of like Gatorade Zero or Pedialyte or the Gatorade Light that has like the electrolytes in it. I like that with some Smirnoff in it. It's delicious. It's exactly what I'm looking for. And you can get the bottle of Smirnoff for $12.99. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Pricing at the sole discretion of the retailer may vary by state. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. You do not need to spend a fortune for vodka. Smirnoff, we do game days. Let's talk about that. That was the last thing I really wanted to get your take on. There's teams that don't have a quarterback right now. The Steelers, the Giants, at least as of, this morning when we're recording it. What would Aaron Rodgers mean to either one of those teams in your mind?
I actually think I might downgrade them. I think Aaron Rodgers is the type of player that just brings the entire organization down, and he's not good enough to deal with the distractions and the chemistry issues. I think it's time for Aaron Rodgers to go host Jeopardy, which he's excellent at.
Is he really?
Oh, he's very good. He's very he's very good at many things. Probably the thing Aaron Rodgers is best at is sandbagging. I always see that plaque at Pebble Beach where he won the Pro-Am tournament because he claimed to be like a 10 handicapper when he was like a 3 handicapper. Nice job, Aaron.
Yeah, you hate that. You always reference that. All right, what about, Steve? Let's dive into some of the basketball stuff because there's a lot there. And we'll start with college basketball conference tournament. Now, first of all, you're like on an absolute roll because I follow you on social media at Fezzik Sports. It's incredible.
Yeah, so it's been great. 12-2 run here since last Thursday. And, every other handicapper is like, oh, I'm seeing the ball well. And I'm absolutely dialed in. And the truth is, Ross, you go 12-2. Know what you need? You got a game under. You need like no fouling in the last 28 seconds of a game where you're winning by a point. You need the breaks to go your way, as well as good handicapping to be that good. You need to make sure you play an under, and you got to make sure the game doesn't go into overtime. And so that's been happening for me. Knock on wood. Let's continue it.
Yeah, how about my guy Big Cat from Barstool won like 16 in a row or something, which that's unheard of.
The
and
irony,
he's a DraftKings Sportsbook guy too.
The irony of that is that I was unaware of the Big Cat, and then I totally by accident. By the way, I did release before him, so I'm not copying Big Cat. We landed on the same game. So there's a Summit League championship game, and championship games tend to go under in these smaller conferences. You want to look towards under. So Omaha is playing St. Martin. I always think about St. Martin or St. Thomas. I always think about they're in the Caribbean. And it's a championship game, but because one of the teams was ineligible for the NCAA tournament, normally, these games are so important and played so close to the vest. I'm like, no, it's happy action fun time. Omaha's already in the tournament. And that's how it played out in the second half, as there was a whole lot of running.
Nice. The Big Cat is amazing, by the way. I don't know if Big Cat listens to the show, but I know PFT Commenter does because he referenced West Shore Home on when he was on the Ross Tucker podcast talking about the Commanders. By the way, speaking of West Shore Home, they not only do they sponsor the podcast, Steve, they just got the naming rights to Penn State's football stadium yesterday. We talked about that. I had the founder and CEO BJ Werzen on today's Ross Tucker football podcast because it's now going to be West Shore Home Field at Beaver Stadium for Penn State. So it's a terrible decision by them, by the way. All of that money should have gone into the Ross Tucker Podcast Network.
100%. You got to go ahead.
I mean, what's more valuable? Okay,
support the local business that's that is in your business, which is football.
I'm teasing, of course. They've been a wonderful sponsor. Okay, so here we are, Steve. What do we need to know? We talked about this a little bit last week, so we don't want to be redundant, but last week we were talking more about the smaller school conference tournaments, the smaller ones. Now this week, it's more about the bigger conference tournaments. Curious to get your thoughts on betting these and if you have any best bets. I know you got a lot to say about college basketball conference tournaments.
I'll give out as best bets today. There's 2 conference tournament championships, and I think I played both the games under. So Delaware, NC Wilmington under 148, Youngstown State, Robert Morris under 139. So those are both on my card. Just in general, really important games, 10 more to go under. So when you go into the bigger conferences, we want to look towards the bubble teams, the teams that are trying to get in. And Joe Lunardi has them last 4 in or last 4 out. And those are the teams that need the game like blood. And I look towards unders with those teams.
Ooh, I like that. That makes sense a lot. Because people just get tighter defense. Every possession's like more valued, right?
And if you're the scrub, if you're Ross Tucker playing intramurals, man, you're going to score like 22 a game, and they're feeding you the ball. But if you're like the number 4 starter, think about this, and you get an open 3, and you're only a 30% from 3 shooter. Yeah, you'll take that shot in January. You're not shooting the rock in March. You're passing to your playmaker. Tick, tick, tick.
You know what we like on this show, and really all my shows? Winners. And picking winners. You can be an easy winner at rewards.labattusa.com. All you need to do is buy beer and you get gear. What does that mean? Take a picture of any Labatt that product that you buy. Any beer, any size, stadium, store, doesn't matter. Then you upload it instantly to rack up points for incredible merch from rewards.labattusa.com. Very interesting. All right. Anything else before we get to specifically March Madness? Anything else on conference tournaments?
Be careful fading the dead teams. You can have a team that can't play a lick all year long, and all of a sudden, like Phoenix rising from the ashes, a team that looked totally disinterested and dead, they're bringing it. They know this is their one chance to resurrect their season. So I'd be very careful if you've been betting against a bad team to do that in the conference tournament. I'd also be very careful if you're live wagering the end game. The rules change right now. So normally during the regular season, if a team's down 11, there's a minute to play. You might get no scoring that final 60 seconds. Now, Ross, you might get 12 points, 14, 16 points. Teams will foul down 11, down 12, down 13 when this is the final game of the year. So be careful with your total betting in live wagering.
Ooh, You can't use the same math you do during the season.
Absolutely not. So in general, once a team is like up 15, I assume it's pretty safe with 2 minutes to play. It's going to be a quiet final 2 minutes. That is not necessarily the case at all. Look,
All
no
right,
more
what
like
about-
this.
Go ahead.
Well, like last night, for instance, in Vegas, the St. Mary's or the Gonzaga game, for instance, the Zags were up like 10. They were supposed to win by 15, and that game just wouldn't end. You just kept seeing more and more and more scoring with San Francisco not giving up.
What about, Steve, in the SEC in particular, which obviously has had a good year from a college basketball standpoint?
Yeah, so let's watch the SEC very closely and see if any of these teams are going to do the savvy move and not really prioritize the SEC tournament. They probably won't because, this is a nice big jewel to be able to say hardware that you won the SEC tournament. But let's face it, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, even Missouri, all these fine teams, they got bigger fish to fry. And like if Florida's dumb enough to chase a number 1 seed, the worst thing that could possibly happen for the Gators is to play their hearts out, play all these games, win the SEC championship, and then get booted in the second round by some motivated 8 seed like BYU because players get banged up and celebratory from chasing an SEC championship. What matters is the big crown in the big dance.
You don't think the number 1 seed's worth it?
No, absolutely not. The only thing the number 1 seed does is that it gives you an automatic win unless you're Purdue. Yes, I remember Purdue 2 years ago losing in the first round because I lost 80,000 on that game on the money line. But the path between a 1, if you get seeded as a 1 in Florida, you're going to get seeded as like the 4 seed 1. Who cares? If you get a 2, you're going to be the 5th seed 2. You're going to basically have the same matchup anyways.
All right, so then let's dive into it, Steve. Sunday night is Selection Sunday. The bracket will come out. I guess the first thing is, let's start with betting, because you have a little bit of time. You have 48 hours there to get your bracket ready, or depending on what people do with the first 4. And we'll talk more in particular about the bracket next week. But what should we do, or what should we look at from a betting perspective right when that bracket comes out on Sunday?
Hidden home field. Teams that are playing really close to home, they travel better, they play better. So any team, if one team has to travel 1,000 miles and another team only has to travel 80 miles, and maybe they got to go across a state border, that's a big edge to be able to, go ahead and play there. So because of that, I'm always mindful of teams that are going to have the bigger crowd, mostly because they're closer to home.
Ooh, okay. So that's a big one. Anything else, like from the seeds or from certain conferences playing others? Anything else that really is notable when those lines first come out? How quickly do they get the lines up?
Oh, within like 20 minutes, they start popping up one by one. So, and I think DraftKings does a really nice job getting them up really early, and they deal a little bit of an opinion. So it won't be unusual that you might see a team be a 12-point favorite in one location, someone else opens at 15, and then usually it converges together quickly. So you'll have middles that you can play and soft numbers, based upon, because think about this, when you bet against an opener, you're betting against one dude. You're betting against the head of the trading department at DraftKings and his team, but ultimately one guy decides. Versus when you bet right before a game starts, you're betting against the world. The world is saying this is what the spread should be, and it's tough to be right against the world.
So then the next thing is we'll have people that want to fill out brackets. Now, they can wait till next Tuesday morning when we record the show, and we'll dive into the brackets. And I know you have very strong opinions about that, but I also know that you have sort of a lesson that people should know when they're filling out their bracket in terms of how many people are filling it out, right?
Yeah, you need to know how large the pool is that you're playing against. So if it was one-on-one, me versus Ross Tucker, I would say, I'm taking every favorite in every game, Ross. That's my bracket. Good luck beating me. Because think about it. I mean, if you want to deviate and you want to take a 2-point underdog, well, of course I'm favored because my team's going to win 54% of the time. But when there's 10,000 people or 1 million people in a nationwide bracket, well, now I got to get creative and I got to start looking towards a San Diego State or a Florida Atlantic, not this year, to make the Final Four.
Got it. And that's really who ends up winning is the people that end up having a couple teams go a long way.
Absolutely, because you got to distinguish yourself.
Interesting. Do you fill out a bracket, Steve, or do you just do straight betting?
I just do straight betting. The brackets are entertaining and they're really fun, and I wish I had time. It's funny, my family all does it, and they invite me every year. They've invited me every year to do it for like the past 30 years, and I'm like the crazy uncle that doesn't have time.
All right, but also you always say don't pick certain teams to win it. Do a mechanical parlay, right?
Yeah, and I want to elaborate
We'll talk about this
on that
more next week too, but.
Yeah, I'm gonna in 45 seconds. I'll explain why. Because if you just roll the team over again and again and again, if they paid 50 to 1, you'd wind up making like 140 to 1 if you did the mechanical parlay. But here's another reason why it's stupid. It's like even if I did the mechanical parlay, let's assume I bet a team 100 to 1, and by some miracle they make it to the finals, right? So now I've already won 25 units, and they're 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 in against some great team in the finals. Am I suddenly going to bet 25 units, Ross, at plus 300 on anything? Of course not. I mean, that would be a foolish bet when I normally bet 2 units. So that's where the mechanical parlay fails. Also, it's better than betting them the first way, but it's still like wagering way too much money in the last 2 games on a long shot.
Got it. Check him out on social media. He is the man, as you can tell, at Fezzik Sports. Next week, we'll clean up everything that's happened with other teams with quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones. We'll see where they land and what that means from Steve's standpoint. But also, we will be all in on March Madness, NCAA tournament, filling out your bracket, bets that Steve likes. You will know exactly what Steve is doing in the first 4 and first round, Thursday and Friday of March Madness. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. Good luck, everybody. Hope you guys win some money.
Thanks for tuning in to Even Money. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.